Just for people who, have got lives and jobs and kids to get up in the morning and don't keep abreast of every single detail of this. Can we just go back and let's just explain a little bit about what this is? I mean, the news that Jeremy Corbyn has spent a lot of time with Palestinian politicians of all kinds. Some we would regard as just plain and simple terrorists. Some not. That's not news. The news that Jeremy Corbyn was at this wreath laying back in 2014 to these Palestinians is actually, again, not a news story. He himself wrote about this in the Morning Star back in 2014, having attended it. And in 2017, last year, in an interview on Sky News, he actually said, yes, he had been at a tribute, a wreath laying for these terrorists. But just to clarify for people who don't know, when we talk about Black September and these terrorists, these were the terrorists who are believed to have been behind, to have orchestrated the Munich massacre. And the Munich massacre was an attack on the Israeli Olympic team back in 1972, the Summer Olympics in Munich in West Germany. And the Palestinian terrorist group Black September seized 11 Israeli Olympic team members, took them hostage. They were brutally tortured, and they were murdered alongside also a West German police officer as part of that horrific ordeal. Just to put this in context, I mean, this was a huge story at the time. It continues to be a huge issue in Germany, in Israel, of course. And now we've got Jeremy Corbyn saying he was present at a wreath laying to the people believed to be behind it, but he doesn't think he was involved. Do you, A, believe him, and B, does it matter whether he was there or not?
Two things. Do I believe him? Firstly, this is now the third attempt he's had to explain his presence at this event. It's different every time, and I think people around the country cannot quite understand why the leader of the opposition cannot explain clearly what he was doing at this particular incident. I think that goes to trust and his competence. But does it matter? Look, you've explained it very well, Julia, but this incident was when what happened in 1972 was a brutal, pre-planned, premeditated attack on the Summer Olympic Games. Forget that these were Israeli athletes. These were terrorists who burst into the Olympic Village and killed brutally 11 athletes in the middle of the Olympic Games in the heart of the Olympic Village. It was one of the worst terrorist atrocities, certainly in the 70s, and is remembered by the entirety of the sporting world. Now, the distasteful thing about this whole event is that Jeremy Corbyn has made no apology whatsoever for having been present at an event at which the perpetrators of that brutal act were honoured. Now, Jeremy Corbyn is now, he wasn't then, the leader of the opposition and the leader of the Labour Party. It's worth reminding everybody what the leader of the Labour Party in 1972, when this happened, said. That was Harold Wilson, and he unequivocally condemned in the strongest possible terms the terrorist outrage at the 1972 Olympics. Fast forward now, and you have a leader of the opposition who not only does he not condemn what happened, he appears to be present at an event that honours the memory of the perpetrators of that terrible terrorist act.
Now, this is it, exactly. He was a backbench MP. No one really cared what he did. In fact, he used to spend quite a lot of time. I mean, he spent most of his time going to conferences and ceremonies involving some very, very, very questionable characters. The fact that Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has said that Jeremy Corbyn deserves unequivocal condemnation for his presence at that service, that may not actually have helped matters, in the sense that actually an awful lot of Corbyn supporters, we've already embroiled in this anti-Semitism row, largely this is all about his hatred of Israel and questioning about whether or not Israel even has a right to exist. It would seem to me that this actually plays into the Corbynistas' hands, that they will be absolutely rubbing their hands with glee, saying, well, there you are then. This is Jeremy Corbyn standing up to this evil man. Benjamin Netanyahu's carried out some, no doubt at all, I think many people on many sides of the political debates would argue some questionable policies while he's been Prime Minister of Israel. Many of his own people would question a lot of his policies. Do you think this is, I mean, with any normal leader of any normal political party in any normal day and age, this would be enough to bring him down? But in this case, I think this is actually going to cement Jeremy Corbyn's position. What do you think?
Well, I think I'd like to just put to one side the criticism that's come internationally from this, wherever it's from, and there has been a lot of criticism. I think you're right. It's quite amazing that the leader of the opposition feels that he needs to obfuscate about what he was doing at this particular event. I mean, this is somebody who believes and says that he is passionately opposed to all forms of terrorism, that he would honour all victims of terrorism. Yet he has done exactly the opposite of honouring the victims of the brutal terrorism at the 1972 Olympics, because he has gone and been present at a ceremony that honours the perpetrators of that. But I also want to pick up on the first thing you said there, Julia, which you talked about it, well, he was just a humble backbencher. I mean, this was in 2013, 2014, by which time Jeremy Corbyn had been a member of Parliament for over 20 years. And although he was a backbencher, he had previously considered standing for the leadership of the Labour Party, and just a year later he would indeed stand for the leadership of the Labour Party and become the leader. So this is not some naive, young backbench MP. This is somebody who knew exactly what he was doing. And I have no problem with him being a strong, passionate supporter of the rights of the Palestinian people. But the Jewish community has a major problem with him appearing so vividly to be prepared to honour the memory of the perpetrators of one of the most brutal terrorist attacks, not just to hit the state of Israel, but to hit the sporting world and, in fact, the world in general. And that calls into question his judgment, and the way he is responding to this now by refusing to admit what he was doing and refusing to apologise is also questioning his ability as leader of the opposition to deal with a crisis that should have been easy for him to address.
What about the arguments that Jeremy Corbyn would give and many Corbyn supporters would give that he spends time with these people, it's important to talk. He even in his statements yesterday was saying you don't resolve these issues, whether it's Palestine, whether it's Northern Ireland. His argument has always been you have to talk to people and that's how you resolve these issues. And he spends time with these people, and part of that will be paying tribute to people who they care about. Is that an explanation, a justification, a good reason?
No. It would be if he talked to everybody, if he would talk to Israelis, if he would look at that side of this. But I want to just he's trying to broaden this into broader issues. This is actually about a memorial, about a wreath laying to honour the memory of perpetrators of a terrorist act. If he had an ounce of common sense, of political nous, if he had any sense of how this might play out, he would have seen where he was, he would have handed that wreath over, and he would have stepped back. But he did exactly the opposite. He took the wreath, he stood there when it was laid, and he cannot now avoid in any way the conclusion that he was present at a ceremony to honour the perpetrators of a terrible murderous act at the heart of the Olympic Games.
And despite his words, Jeremy Corbyn, present at that wreath laying, but also involved in it. Simon Johnson, Chief Executive of the Jewish Leadership Council, thank you very much indeed.